What if a simple act of kindness, a moment of compassion for a crying child, could catapult you from an ordinary life of struggle to a world of unimaginable wealth, influence, and responsibility? A young waitress, caught between survival and her dreams, makes one fateful choice that leads her into a labyrinth of power, secrets, and a bond with a boy who will change her life forever. Would you dare to step into a world where everything is different, yet the stakes are higher than ever? Serafina Caldwell navigated the premier lounge with the quiet precision of someone who perfected the art of going unnoticed. At 29, she was striking yet understated, tall, with porcelain skin and gray-green eyes that held a quiet resilience. Her chestnut hair was pinned into a neat bun, her navy uniform pressed despite the exhaustion carved into her posture. For 9 hours a day, she served the world's wealthiest, tech titans, diplomats, and celebrities who rarely met her gaze as she poured their rare vintages or cleared their silver-rimmed plates. By night, she retreated to a modest apartment in Tacoma, where she cared for her ailing mother, Lysandra, and poured her soul into her sketchbook, capturing vibrant cityscapes and fleeting dreams of becoming an artist. Serafina's life was a delicate balancing act. Lysandra's heart condition drained their savings, forcing Serafina to juggle 2 jobs, days at the lounge, nights at a quaint cafe in Pike Place Market. Her sketches were her sanctuary, a fragile thread connecting her to a future she scarcely dared imagine. Growing up in a working-class Seattle suburb, Serafina had learned to survive, losing her father at 10, stretching every dollar, and burying her own desires to keep her family afloat. Kindness was her instinct, but in the lounge, it was a liability. Her manager, Mr. Warwick, a lean man with a perpetual scowl and a knack for spotting weakness, enforced rigid rules. No personal interactions, no deviations from protocol. One misstep could cost her job, and with Lysandra's medical bills mounting, that wasn't an option. Tonight, the lounge thrummed with heightened energy. A global tech summit had drawn a constellation of power players, their conversations crackling with billion-dollar stakes. Serafina moved swiftly, balancing trays of canapes and dodging Warwick's piercing glare. Caldwell, table 8's waiting, stopped dawdling. He barked, his eyes narrowing. Serafina nodded, her jaw tight, swallowing the familiar sting of his disdain. She'd learned to keep her head down, but tonight, the air felt electric, like a storm gathering beyond the lounge's glass walls overlooking the tarmac. As Serafina refilled a carafe at table 7, a sound sliced of the lounge's polished hum, a child's sob, sharp and anguished, raw with despair. She froze, her eyes scanning the opulent room. In a shadowed corner near the grand piano, a small boy huddled, his knees drawn to his chest, his face buried in his hands. His cries were muffled but relentless, a stark intrusion into the lounge's curated indifference. No one else seemed to notice or care. Guests sipped their drinks, their laughter grating against the boy's distress. Serafina glanced at Warwick, who was busy schmoozing with a tech mogul. The rules were ironclad. Staff were to avoid guest interactions, especially with children. Breaking protocol could mean instant dismissal, and Serafina couldn't afford to lose this job. Not with Lysandra's next hospital bill looming. But the boy's sobs clawed at her, a visceral pull that drowned out reason. She'd seen pain like this before, in her mother's weary eyes during her worst days, in her own reflection after nights of endless worry. Setting her tray down, she approached, her heart pounding like a drum. "Hey, little one," she said, crouching a few feet away, her voice soft as a lullaby. "Are you okay?" The boy flinched, his sobs hitching, but he didn't look up. He was young, perhaps 7, with tousled sandy hair and designer clothes that looked out of place on his crumpled frame. A backpack lay beside him, its contents spilling out. Crayons, a crumpled drawing, a worn stuffed bear with a frayed ear. Serafina's heart ached. She'd carried her own tattered toys as a child, clinging to them through her father's absence. "I'm Serafina," she continued, keeping her distance to avoid startling him. "What's your name?" No response, just more sobs. Serafina hesitated, then pulled a napkin and pen from her apron, sketching a quick cartoon of a bear with a lopsided smile. "This guy looks like he needs a friend. Want to draw with him?" The boy peeked through his fingers, his tear-streaked face softening slightly. Hesitantly, he took the napkin and scribbled a wobbly line. Serafina smiled, adding a star to the bear's paw. Minute by minute, his sobs quieted, replaced by the soft scratch of pen on paper. The lounge's hum faded, and Serafina's world narrowed to the boy beside her. They created a story about a brave bear on a quest through a magical forest, and slowly, his breathing steadied, his small frame relaxing. "What's his name?" Serafina asked, nodding at the stuffed bear. "Ambrose," he whispered, his voice so faint she almost missed it. "Ambrose? That's a strong name," Serafina said, her tone warm but gentle. "Where's your family, Ambrose?" He froze, his eyes darting toward the lounge's entrance, wide with fear. They'll come back." Serafina's instincts flared. His fear was too deep, too specific. Something was terribly wrong. But she didn't push. Instead, she kept drawing, letting him find comfort in her presence. They added a castle to their story, and Ambrose's voice grew slightly bolder, sharing details about the bear's adventure. For the first time, a ghost of a smile flickered across his face. "Caldwell." Warwick's voice cracked like a whip, shattering the fragile moment. Serafina stood, her pulse racing as her manager stormed over, his face flushed with fury. "What the hell are you doing? You're not paid to babysit." "I'm sorry, Mr. Warwick," Serafina said, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her chest. He was upset. "I just wanted to help." "Rules exist for a reason," Warwick hissed, his eyes glinting with disdain. "You're already on thin ice after last week's tardiness. This is a first-class lounge, not a daycare. Get back to work or you're done." Serafina nodded, her stomach churning. But before she could move, a couple burst into the lounge, their faces etched with panic. The man was tall, with silver-streaked hair and a bespoke suit that spoke of wealth. The woman, elegant in a silk dress, had eyes red from worry. They spotted Ambrose and rushed over, dropping to their knees beside him. "Ambrose, thank God," the woman said, pulling him into her arms, her voice trembling. The man looked at Serafina, his expression a mix of relief and curiosity. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice calm but commanding, carrying the weight of someone used to being obeyed. "Serafina Caldwell, sir," she replied, bracing for trouble. "I work here. I saw Ambrose crying, and I just tried to help." The woman looked up, her eyes softening through her tears. "You comforted him? He doesn't let strangers near him." Serafina shifted, uncomfortable under their scrutiny. "We just drew together. He's okay now." Warwick cleared his throat, stepping forward with a forced smile. "My apologies, Mr. and Mrs. Warrington. This won't happen again. Caldwell, back to your station." But the man, Hadrian Warrington, raised a hand, silencing Warwick with a single gesture. "No, we'd like to speak with her. Alone." Serafina's heart skipped. She'd broken protocol, and now she was face to face with people who radiated power. Warwick's glare burned into her, promising retribution, but the Warrington's intensity held her captive. She braced for a reprimand, but what came next turned her world upside down. In a private alcove of the lounge, shielded by frosted glass, Hadrian and Isolde Warrington sat across from Serafina. Ambrose nestled between them, clutching his bear. Hadrian's presence was magnetic, his voice measured but warm, like a diplomat navigating a crisis. Isolde, though poised, had a quiet intensity, her gratitude radiating in every word, her hands trembling slightly as she held Ambrose close. "Our son has selective mutism," Isolde explained, her voice soft but heavy with emotion. "It started after an incident last year, an attempted kidnapping. He doesn't speak to most people, not even his therapists. But he spoke to you." Serafina swallowed, the weight of their words sinking in. I wanted him to feel safe." Hadrian leaned forward, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she wasn't used to. "That's more than anyone's done in months. We're in Seattle for business, but our home is in Boston. Ambrose needs someone he trusts, someone who can reach him. We'd like to offer you a job as his companion." Serafina blinked, the words not fully registering. "A job? I'm just a waitress." You're more than that, Isolde said firmly, her voice cutting through Serafina's doubt. Ambrose trusts you. That's rare. Priceless to us. Hadrian slid a card across the table, his expression earnest. The role comes with generous salary, housing, and support for your needs, your mother's medical care, anything else. Think about it, Serafina. You could change his life. Serafina stared at the card, her mind reeling. The offer was a lifeline. Financial security to ease her mother's burdens, a chance to breathe, maybe even pursue her art. But it was also terrifying. She had no training, no experience in childcare, no place in the Warringtons' world of private jets and sprawling estates. What if she failed Ambrose? What if she couldn't survive in their universe of wealth and influence? I need time to think, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, her hands trembling as she tucked the card into her apron. Hadrian nodded, his gaze steady. Take all the time you need. But know this, we see something in you. Ambrose does too. As Serafina left the alcove, Warwick's glare followed her, his silence more menacing than his usual tirades. She returned to her duties, her mind a storm of possibilities and fears. Outside, Seattle's damp night pressed against the lounge's windows, and Serafina felt the weight of a choice that could rewrite her life. The next 10 days were a blur of doubt and sleepless nights. Serafina went through her shifts at the lounge and cafe mechanically, the card tucked into her sketchbook like a talisman. At night, she sat by Lysander's bedside, watching her mother's chest rise and fall, the beeping of the heart monitor a constant reminder of their precarious life. The medical bills on the kitchen table were a growing mountain, each one a silent accusation. Serafina's sketches grew darker, stormy seas, fractured cities, figures lost in shadows, mirroring the turmoil in her heart. She thought of Ambrose, his small voice and trusting eyes, the way he clung to her napkin drawing like a lifeline. She thought of her art, relegated to stolen moments between exhaustion and duty. And she thought of the Warringtons' offer, a chance to break free from her grinding existence, to build a future for herself and her mother. But the risks loomed large, leaving her familiar struggles, stepping into a world where she might not belong, and taking responsibility for a child whose pain ran deeper than she could fathom. One rainy evening, as thunder rumbled over Tacoma, Serafina sat with her sketchbook, drawing Ambrose's bear in a field of stars. Lysander stirred, her voice weak but clear. You're carrying too much, Serafina. If this job give you a chance to live, not just survive, take it. Serafina's eyes burned with tears. Her mother's words cut through her fears, giving her clarity. She called Hadrian that night, her voice trembling but resolute. I'll do it. I'll be Ambrose's companion. 2 weeks later, Serafina stepped into the Warrington Seattle estate, a sprawling mansion in Medina that felt like a palace from a dream. The transition was jarring, marble floors, art-filled walls. Staff who addressed her as Miss Caldwell with quiet deference. Lysander was moved to a private care facility, her treatment fully funded by the Warringtons, a weight lifted from Serafina's shoulders. Her new life felt surreal, but Ambrose's shy smile as he ran to greet her grounded her in purpose. Serafina's role was both simple and profound. Be there for Ambrose, help him feel safe, guide him through his silence. Her days revolved around him, their time together a delicate dance of patience and presence. They drew for hours, Serafina's sketches of fantastical worlds, dragons soaring over emerald valleys, ships sailing through starry skies, sparking Ambrose's imagination. She read him stories, her voice a soothing balm for his anxieties, and slowly he began to speak more. First in whispers, then in full sentences, his words tentative but growing bolder. Serafina's art became their bridge, her drawings a language they both understood. She taught him to express his fears on paper, guiding him to sketch his nightmares. Dark figures, locked doors, and then transform them into something less frightening. One afternoon, Ambrose drew a monster with glowing eyes, then added a crown of flowers, his small voice declaring, "Now to friend." Serafina's heart swelled, seeing his courage take root. Hadrian and Isolde were astonished by his progress. "He's laughing again," Isolde said one evening, tears glistening in her eyes as she watched Ambrose chase a butterfly in the mansion's garden. "You're a miracle, Serafina." But Serafina didn't feel like a miracle. She felt like an imposter, her past a constant shadow. She missed her old life, the banter with cafe co-workers, the gritty familiarity of her struggles. Nights were the hardest, when she lay awake in her spacious room, the silence of the mansion amplifying her doubts. Was she enough for Ambrose? Could she truly belong in this world of wealth and power? To cope, Serafina leaned into her art, sketching in the early mornings before Ambrose woke. Her work grew bolder, infused with the emotions of her new life. Portraits of Ambrose's tentative smiles, abstract her own fears and hopes. The Warringtons noticed, encouraging her to pursue her passion. Isolde gifted her a set of professional art supplies, and Hadrian arranged for a tutor to guide her in technique. Serafina's confidence grew, but so did the pressure to prove herself worthy of their trust. For months into her role, Gideon Warrington, Ambrose's grandfather and the patriarch of the Warrington Empire, arrived unannounced, his presence like a storm rolling into the mansion. A formidable man in his late 70s, Gideon had built a global conglomerate spanning tech, finance, and real estate. His sharp eyes missed nothing, and his gravelly voice commanded absolute attention. Over a tense dinner, he studied Serafina, his gaze piercing through her carefully composed exterior. "You're not what I expected," he said, his tone blunt as he cut into a steak. "No credentials, no pedigree. Yet my grandson trusts you more than his Harvard-educated therapists." "Why?" Serafina met his gaze, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "I don't have degrees, sir, but I know what it's like to feel alone. I listen to Ambrose. I see him." Gideon's lips twitched, a rare hint of approval. Honesty, rare in our world. He leaned back, his tone softening slightly. "You're family now, Serafina. Don't forget that." The word family hit her like a tidal wave. She'd never had that kind of belonging, not since her father's death. But Gideon's approval came with unspoken expectations. The Warringtons' world was a labyrinth of power, business empires, political ties, and simmering rivalries. Serafina began to notice the undercurrents. Hushed phone calls in the middle of the night, security teams that shadowed Ambrose even in the mansion, a tension that pulsed beneath the family's polished surface. One night, Ambrose woke screaming, his nightmare vivid and terrifying. Serafina rushed his room, finding him curled into a ball, his face wet with tears. "They're coming for me," he sobbed, his words chilling. Serafina knew about the kidnapping attempt, a targeted attack by the rival family, the Strathmores, seeking leverage over the Warringtons' business interests. She held him, promising he was safe, but the incident shook her to her core. She wasn't just helping Ambrose heal. She was protecting him in ways she hadn't anticipated, stepping into a role far beyond companionship. The next morning, Hadrian pulled her aside, his expression grave. "The Strathmores are still a threat, Serafina. Their reach is long, and Ambrose's safety is our priority. Your role, it's more than we asked. If it's too much, you can walk away. No one would blame you." Serafina's heart pounded. Walking away meant returning to her old life, safe, familiar, but suffocating. It meant leaving Ambrose, abandoning the bond they'd built, the progress he'd made. She thought of Lysandra, now stable thanks to the Warrington support. She thought of her art, flourishing in ways she'd never imagined. "I'm staying," she said, her voice firm, a fire kindling in her chest. "Ambrose needs me." Hadrian's relief was palpable, his hand resting briefly on her shoulder. "You're braver than you know, Serafina." The tension escalated 6 months into Serafina's role, when a security breach rocked the mansion. Late one night, alarms blared, red lights flashing through corridors. The Warrington security team swarmed the grounds, their radios crackling with urgency. A drone had been intercepted, carrying sophisticated surveillance equipment. Its signal traced to a Strathmore-affiliated shell company. The Warringtons were on edge, their trust in their inner circle fraying like a worn rope. Serafina, now a trusted part of the household, was drawn into the crisis. As the security team analyzed the drone's data, she sat in the mansion's command center, a high-tech room she'd never seen before, watching grainy footage flicker on screens. Something caught her eye, a pattern in the drone's flight path, a subtle irregularity in the timestamps that didn't align with external interference. Her instincts, honed by years of reading people and situations, kicked in. She cross-referenced the data with staff schedules, her mind racing. "Hadrian," she said, her voice cutting through the room's tension. "It's not just the Strathmores. Someone inside is helping them." The room went silent, all eyes on her. Hadrian's face hardened. "What are you saying?" Serafina pointed to the data. The drone signal was boosted from within the state. Look at the access logs. Someone used a staff ID to disable the perimeter sensors at the exact time the drone entered. Gideon, who'd been observing silently, stepped forward, his expression thunderous. "Who?" Serafina hesitated, then named the suspect. Lenora, a trusted aide who'd been with the family for years. Her ID was used, and she was on duty that night. It's too precise to be a coincidence. An investigation followed, swift and merciless. Lenora's betrayal was confirmed. She'd been leaking information to the Strathmores, driven by a long-buried grudge against Gideon over a business deal that ruined her family. Her confession, tearful and bitter, left the Warringtons reeling. Serafina's quick thinking had exposed the traitor, preventing a catastrophic breach, but the aftermath was heavy. Trust, already fragile, was now a scarce commodity. Gideon summoned Serafina to his study, a wood panel room lined with books and trophies of his conquests. "You saved us," he said, his voice gruff but laced with respect. "Not just Ambrose, but our legacy. You're more than a companion, Serafina. You're a guardian." Serafina's throat tightened. She'd never seen herself as anything but ordinary, yet here she was, shaping the fate of a powerful family. Gideon handed her a letter, an offer to fund her education at the prestigious school of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, a gesture of gratitude and unwavering belief in her potential. "I don't know what to say," Serafina whispered, her hands trembling as she held the letter. "Say yes," Gideon replied, his eyes softening for the first time. "You've earned it, and more." 2 months later, Serafina received a call from a former colleague at the lounge, her voice brimming with gossip. Mr. Warwick had been sacked, his career imploding after a series of complaints about his draconian management. Whispers circulated that the Warringtons had intervened, their influence reaching SeaTac's board after learning of Warwick's harsh treatment of Serafina. The news brought a quiet satisfaction. Warwick's reprimand for her kindness had cost him everything, a poetic justice that felt like a small victory in Serafina's journey. The Warringtons' gratitude deepened, their bond with Serafina growing into something akin to family. Hadrian approached her with a new proposal, joined them for a summer in Boston, not just as Ambrose's companion, but as a member of their household, with the opportunity to enroll at the school of the Museum of Fine Arts. "You're not just his caretaker," Hadrian said, his voice warm with conviction. "You're part of us, Serafina. Come build your future with us." Serafina hesitated, the weight of the offer overwhelming. Boston meant leaving Seattle, her mother, and the last threads of her old life. It meant stepping fully into a world of power and privilege she still struggled to navigate. But Ambrose's hopeful eyes, clutching a new drawing of their bear hero, swayed her. She thought of Lysandra, now healthy and urging her to seize this chance. She thought of her art, ready to bloom on a larger canvas. "I'll come," she said, her voice steady, a smile breaking through her fears. In Boston, Serafina's world expanded like a galaxy unfolding. She and Ambrose explored the city, museums bursting with history, parks alive with color, galleries that ignited her imagination. Ambrose's voice grew stronger, his laughter a melody that filled Serafina's heart. He spoke freely now, sharing stories and dreams, his selective mutism a fading shadow. Serafina's art flourished, her sketches evolving into bold paintings that captured the raw beauty of human connection. The school of the Museum of Fine Arts welcomed her, her portfolio earning praise from instructors who saw her potential. But the Strathmore's threat lingered, casting a pall over the Warringtons' new chapter. One evening, as Serafina and Ambrose walked through Boston Common, a man in a dark coat followed them, his presence too deliberate to be coincidence. Serafina's instincts kicked in, her years of navigating unsafe neighborhoods sharpening her senses. She ushered Ambrose to the Warrington security team, who apprehended the man, a Strathmore operative gathering intelligence for a new plot. The incident rattled Serafina, reminding her of the stakes. She wasn't just Ambrose's companion. She was a shield, a role that demanded courage she hadn't known she possessed. That night, Ambrose clung to her, his voice small but clear. "You kept me safe, Serafina, like the bear in our story." Her heart broke and mended in the same breath. "Always," she promised, holding him close. A year later, Serafina stood in a Boston gallery, her first exhibition a shimmering milestone. Titled Bridges, her collection wove together Ambrose's healing and her own transformation. Paintings of starry skies, children reaching for light, and figures crossing chasms of fear. The Warringtons funded the show, their pride in her palpable. Critics raved, and Serafina's name began to ripple through art circles, her story of rising from a waitress to an artist captivating the world. Lysandra, now healthy and radiant, joined Serafina in Boston, her presence a grounding force. One evening, in Boston Common, Ambrose handed Serafina a drawing, a vibrant portrait of them together, surrounded by a constellation of stars. "You're my best friend," he said, his voice clear and confident, no trace of the silence that once bound him. "You made me brave." Serafina's eyes filled with tears, her heart so full it ached. She'd come from a life of struggle, invisible to the world, yet here she was, shaping a child's future and forging her own. The Warringtons had given her financial freedom, but Ambrose had given her purpose, a reason to believe in her own strength. Lysandra's embrace, warm and fierce, anchored her in love. At the exhibition's opening, Ambrose took the microphone, his small frame radiating courage. "This is Serafina," he said, his voice ringing to the crowded gallery. "She saved me. She's my hero." The room erupted in applause, and Serafina, standing beside him, felt the weight of her journey lift. Her story wasn't just hers anymore. It was a beacon for anyone who dared to care, to dream, to rise against the odds. As she looked at Ambrose, Lysandra, and the Warringtons, Serafina saw a family forged not by blood but by choice, by a moment of kindness that rippled into eternity. Outside, Boston's light sparkled like a promise, reflecting a world where bridges could be built from the smallest acts of courage. Serafina's journey was far from over, but she knew, with unshakable certainty, that she was exactly where she belonged, a guardian, an artist, a woman whose heart had changed the world.